throw this open to the floor now. The usual data protection warning at this point, which is that all of this is being videoed, and if you ask a question, you'll be videoed by default, but you have the right to say that you don't wish for that to be used. Please approach one of our staff afterwards, and we'll ensure that. So what I'm going to do is ask for questions 3 at a time, and then I will invite the speakers to decide which questions they want to answer. So I think there's a hand up there. If somebody has a microphone, perhaps near in the third row behind the gap. John.
Councillor John Tanner. I think we must have the most informed British electorate now about Europe than we ever had before as we enter these European elections, and I'm thrilled about that, and these elections are actually going to be about Europe. Do the panel members think we will actually ever leave the EU?
Who would like to comment on that?
Well, about 2 weeks after the referendum, Cecilia Malmström, who is the Swedish Commissioner for Trade, came into my office and she said, it'll never happen. There's no way we can do it. So I hang on to those words. Mighty squeaky. I think we're getting... I hang on to those words. I have to say, I didn't think... Is that better? I have to say, I didn't think we would still be there now, despite the fact that I've been saying to my group, don't write us off yet, we're not out yet. But even I didn't think that our government could be as incompetent as it is. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to be party line. I think what it's highlighting is that the British system is a 19th century system trying to work in the 21st century. And we have a huge amount of power in the office of the Prime Minister. And we have the most intransigent Prime Minister that is possible. Will we leave? I cannot see how we can do it. So I am continuing to fight to stop it any which way I can, because I know not just for me, not for you, but for our children and our grandchildren, we have to stay part of the European Union.
Well, first of all, on the British public being well informed, I think they're better informed, but not absolutely supremely well informed, I have to say. And by the way, on the Ivory ban, which I very much admire, I wish, on that theme, someone could stop people on the BBC calling Donald Tusk Donald Tusk. You would think if we were being well informed about the EU, we could at least get his name right. Will we leave the EU? Not if I have anything to do with it. The first answer to that. Analytically, my answer would be, I still think, alas, it is more probable that at the end of the day, we will do that very English thing of finding what sounds like a sensible compromise, and we'll go for some sort of soft Brexit, which in an odd way is the worst of both worlds, because it is the most completely pointless Brexit. You have none of the putative advantages of Brexit, however delusional those may be, but you simply swap first-class membership for second-class membership. And that's what's my biggest fear, is that in this sort of, very English way, I say English advisedly, let's be reasonable and split the difference and find a reasonable compromise. That's what we'll do. However, I think the longer this mess goes on, and in that sense, we owe a huge vote of thanks to Theresa May. I mean, honestly, Remainers should have a statue of Theresa May, just as people in Ukraine should have a statue of Vladimir Putin, because he's in a way the architect of Ukrainian statehood, and Theresa May is upping the chances of us remaining. The longer it goes on, the better the chances have become of getting to the best way out. I mean, that is to say, which is that Parliament makes a genuine compromise which says we will vote for Theresa May's deal on condition that we have a confirmatory referendum. And that then becomes a genuine choice between a real Brexit, a real existing Brexit which has actually been negotiated and agreed by all 27 other EU member states, and staying in the EU. And that's the referendum we want, and then I think we'd win it.
I'm going to invite you for the questions. If the floor mics are sorted, we deviated from our normal plan because we wanted to make sure the sound was all right. So I think the lady in the red is next, and then Alexandrine.
Hi, so I am one of the 3 million.
There's sound control somewhere, sorry. You hold it further away, it probably won't echo so much.
So I am one of the 3 million EU citizens living in the UK, and there's more than 1 million British citizens living in the EU. We are true children of Europe. We based our life on the basic of freedom of movement. We were the subject most talked about. We were the subject most talked about during Brexit debate. We had no say, we still have no say, and we are still mostly talked about. We should never have been a subject of negotiation. We are bargaining chip while we are still being your family, friends, colleague, and we are true contributor to the society.
And I know you feel very passionate about something.
Yes.
And I think we all applaud that sentiment. Is there a question?
Just let it's more to thank you for all the work you are doing to put us on the agenda.
Somebody over there near the back who asked a question back there. In the middle bench seat, yeah. Further over to your right. That's it, yeah.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Question, I think, possibly for Catherine, or possibly Professor Timothy Garton Ash. Very, very interesting. I think it takes a question of information and cultural knowledge of what the institutions of the European Union that we've been exposed to for 43 years are continuing to achieve for us. A question really about public education. Was that kind of briefing that, Catherine, you just gave us? Could you give any kind of idea about would that kind of briefing be necessary to inform a populace of Portugal or Poland or Greece to the same degree that you've been informing us? And I'd like to riff that into something about the media as to what you feel has been the effect of the British media over the last 43 years, both national broadcasters. I mean, there's a popular myth that there has been never been a pro-European Union MEP on Question Time, for example, in all the years of its broadcasting. That's a myth. Knock it down. I'd just like to hear some thoughts around levels of public information.
Thank you. Two very good questions. One more question, then, and we'll hand over to the panel. So whose hand was up first? I think possibly near the back. Is that right? Call for a lady to ask a question.
Thank you, it was very interesting. I just wanted to ask, bearing in mind one of the reasons stated that we decided to leave Europe was our wish to take back control, could the EU have done anything, bearing in mind the rest of Europe feels to some degree similar? Do you think the EU could have done anything itself to have modernised and reflected the way people are feeling at the moment?
So 3 very good questions. But I'll hand over to Timothy first of all.
We don't have a word for being stripped of your citizenship, to the lady who was talking about being an EU citizen. Many European languages do have a word. Germany has a word, Ausbürgerung, being stripped of your citizenship. But all of us, if Brexit happens, will be stripped of our European citizenship against our will. And there's a problem, and maybe Catherine would like to say something about it, which is, it is, I'm afraid, an example of the EU promising more than it delivered. Because we were told from the Maastricht Treaty on that we were European citizens. This was a true citizenship. But it wasn't anything of the kind, because it wasn't actually individual and personal to us. It was purely derivative from your belonging citizenship of the member state. So I think it illustrates a problem with the construction of the EU. On the public education point, many of you will know that after the referendum, the Brexit Party is in the PA system, I can see. But the most Googled question was, what is the EU? Which rather indicates a level of knowledge. I think the combination of two things in many ways determined the outcome of the Brexit referendum. Bad history built upon by bad journalism. So we had a very superficial history schooling about the EU, which is very much an our island story, very old-fashioned history. And then year upon year, week upon week, the Eurosceptic press built upon that that bad history to develop a Eurosceptic narrative. And the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford did a study on the press during the European referendum that showed if you take title plus circulation, 80% of the press, 80% was Eurosceptic. And what is more, it set the news agenda. The Daily Mail set the agenda for the whole broadcast news cycle. So that's a big, big problem which we woke up too late. I'll leave the take back control question to Catherine.
The issue on citizenship, we were here this week with Sophie in the Veld, the Dutch MEP. Many of you might have seen her. She's very popular on the BBC. She was here. Sylvia Guillaume, who is a French MEP, again, and Claude Morin, who is a Labour MEP from London. We work cross-party on this citizenship issue. And right at the very start, right after the referendum, when we had some meetings in the Parliament, we had a hearing, and I said to Guy Verhofstadt, who is our chief negotiator for Parliament on Brexit negotiations, we have to have a standalone agreement. And he laughed. He said, no, that won't be necessary. And a few weeks ago, he said in the plenary, actually, what we need, if we're looking at a no-deal Brexit, we must have a standalone agreement. Pointed out to him that it was something I've been calling for. But it is shocking the way that European citizens have been used as bargaining chips, and the MEPs, because we are the representatives of the citizens of the European Union, we will, I hope, continue to do that, because the governments of the 27 are not that interested. They're much more interested in trade, which is shocking, I know. I think this issue of citizenship, I think the Brits have always relished being subjects. And that's, for the younger generation, I mean, it leaves us sort of a bit, well, certainly leaves me, but certainly younger than me, somewhat bewildered that we're subjects. But it seems to me that we don't mind being subjects, but we're very nervous about being citizens, and I've never quite understood it. When it comes to the education of the public, we are all guilty of not seeing good things in front of us. You can drive around the M25, and it is a road that is easy to drive on, and it is, you know, unless you go around Heathrow, relatively free moving thousands and thousands of cars a day. You go down the road here and hit a pothole, you will remember that pothole, you don't remember the smooth road. And that is one of the problems with the European Union. You don't know that your food is so much safer. You don't know that the clean water that comes out of your tap, you can travel all around, as Timothy said, even without a passport, around Europe, and you know that the water is drinkable. You know that the clothes that you buy, that anything that is imported into the European Union has to comply with certain standards. They're not good enough, but they're better than they used to be. Electrical goods are safe, and housing is safe, timber is, you know, you just name it. Everything that we live with, the benefits from now, from in the 70s, go back to think about the 70s, when your kettle would explode, you know, sometimes, and all sorts of the television. I mean, remember how televisions used to explode? They don't now. We don't even notice that. And that is the difficulty of explaining to people the benefits of the European Union. All they see and they notice are the bad things. And when Farage says there are hundreds of thousands of people coming from Turkey, people go, oh my word, that's awful. But what we don't hear is the good stories and how beneficial that has been. It's human nature, but we've been bad. We do spend a huge amount of money. MEPs are given money to promote the work that they do in their local communities, and we all spend that money. If we had more, can you imagine what the Daily Mail would say about it? The Daily Mail, I should point out, is the largest English language website in the world. Okay, think what they're pumping out on the Daily Mail website. It's beholden to us to talk about the good things, the benefits, and it's much, much harder because, as Churchill pointed out, the lies are halfway around the world before the truth has got its boots on. And we have been very, very remiss, and we haven't even thought about which boots we're going to even put on.
I just wanted to make a couple of comments which actually sort of link some of the questions. I think the reality of losing our European citizenship really hasn't sunk in, particularly with young people. And the idea that you cannot move and work freely within the region within which you live in, and the fact that half the population of a high-income country voted to take it away, and in particular to take it away from people who wanted to use it, which is increasingly our young people, I fear that that message has not really sunk in to many of our young people. And to a certain extent, they're living in a very virtual social media world, and I'm sometimes quite shocked by even the undergraduates we have in this city who haven't quite understood exactly what that is going to mean. And I think part of the media question has to be linked in to what Timothy said right at the beginning about populism, because if you like, Brexit and Trump emerged at a time before we quite understood about technology and social media, and that is something that is actually part of a much, much bigger issue, but I'm sure it also answers partly your media question. But what I really wanted to really sort of focus on is the fact that our government just has completely sheared away from any discussion on migration. It is a taboo topic. And when I have been working with government and with various departments, I have been really quite shocked we are not allowed to discuss migration. And yet we know that migration from a national level, both culturally and economically, is really, really positive. But we also know that there are local conflicts, and it can be very difficult for some populations, particularly when you have an influx of people who are different from you, and it happens very, very quickly. And I think that is one of the things that we have learned, is that people can absorb people of different nationalities and faiths who look different and talk differently, so long as it's paced. But when it's done very, very quickly, it causes problems. But instead of us being able to debate and discuss this and talk about the good things about being in a multicultural migrant society, I think our government completely and utterly refused to put that on the table. And just given that we are, it seems, shifting away from our regional migrations to our Commonwealth migrants, All the evidence is that whereas our Commonwealth migrants, so the way we think about migration is that people make a contribution economically and they also draw down on benefits. Well, all the evidence that has been, that we have is that whereas our Commonwealth migrants on the whole, they make a very good contribution, but because they're more likely to stay, they tend then to draw down on benefits, particularly pensions, NHS, etc. All the evidence is that our EU migrants have been much more fluid and have overall made a far greater economic contribution to our society and have not drawn down on our benefits. But that has never really been publicly discussed, I think.
Thank you, Sarah. So, another round of 3 questions. So the lady at the front here.
I'm one of those people who puts out cards for young people to get them voting. And one of the things that happened before the EU referendum is young people, 16-year-olds or whatever, say, well, I'm not going to be eligible to vote. And I said, well, okay, if you're not eligible to vote, give yourself a target list of people that you're going to persuade. Because then, even if you don't personally have a vote, you end up getting 10 other people to vote. So you do make an impact. And that's something that we can do. And young people can register to vote at 16, even if they can't vote until 18. And they should, you know, we don't know when we're going to be able to change it. But there were several groups, not just the young people, not just the people from the EU who've lived here and paid taxes, who weren't allowed to vote, also the people who Cameron promised were going to get the extension of that 15-year limitation on when they could vote. He promised that that was going to be extended, and he reneged on that. So all of those people weren't able to vote.
Was there a question you wanted to ask as well?
Well, I mean, are those things going to be taken into account? And if we had another referendum, would those things be taken into account?
Okay.
It sounded like a gerrymandered vote.
Well, thank you. Just for those, maybe somebody didn't hear, but I think the points were that, first of all, 16 to 18-year-olds are eligible to register to vote, and there are many potential voters who have exceeded the 15-year limit within the European Union, and therefore are not eligible, but that may change. And would this be something that would apply in a future referendum? I think we'll hold that question for a moment and then ask for the next question. So I see a hand up over there, second row behind the gap. If you'd like to ask your question.
My question is about the possible consequences if we are forced to endure a soft Brexit. Is it likely that there is going to be any chance of a fast-track rejoining Europe? And secondly, what are the likely implications for the United Kingdom, given that Scotland is likely to have Indy Ref 2? My point is that faced with Scotland leaving, possibly Northern Ireland leaving, an English, which it would be, an English government might say, oh dear, I think we'll go back into Europe.
Thank you for that. One more question before we hand over to the team. Yes, I think this lady here has had her hand up for quite a long time. Somebody can... Teacher's voice. Will it carry? Thank you. Very good questions. So who wants to start? Catherine?
The target group, it's a really good point to pick your people. If you're speaking to young people, get them to contact their families. But in the Irish referendum on gay marriage, they had quite a campaign to get young people to contact their grandparents and the older generation and get them. And they said, it's not about you, it's about our future. And that's a really good message to send. The other one I wanted to reply to was, there is no such thing as a soft Brexit. Brexit is Brexit, and it will hugely damage this country. Any sort of Brexit. So there's no such a... Just stop people when they say soft Brexit. There is no such thing as a soft Brexit. As to whether if we in this room all fail and we do leave, to rejoin we have to comply with what is known as the Copenhagen criteria. It's a whole list of things that everybody has to do. Clearly we could fast track a lot. We don't have the death penalty yet. Hopefully, you know, and all of those sorts of things. Look how hard it's been for Turkey, and they've now even gone backwards, and they're now have lost their status as an applicant country. It is a long, difficult list, and if we have diverged, as we would do, even a few years away from the European standards, we would find it tricky. But we would then have to do the full compliance procedure to go back in. I think if we leave, it'll be about 5 years before we put in the application, can we come back? And I also think, like you, that if we do, the United Kingdom it will be threatened, and it will be England on its own. I'm not wedded to a country being a certain state as it is now. I'm much more happy with Europe of regions. So for me, it wouldn't be the end of the world if the United Kingdom ceased to be the United Kingdom and Scotland went on its own island, rejoined the Republic. It is down to those people who live there to make decisions about their own futures. And I think that is why I think we would very rapidly be putting up our hand and say, excuse me, we made a mistake, can we come back in again?
For once, we're going to have some disagreement on this panel, because I think that's actually terribly optimistic. I really don't think, and I think it's a really important point, I don't think Remainers suddenly become rejoiners and we're back in 5 to 10 years. Let me tell you why. First of all, English are pretty bloody-minded people. Cussed people, they've been sold a pack of lies for a long time. It'll take quite a long time before people are ready to acknowledge human nature being what it is, and English nature perhaps in particular, that we made this mistake. Given that, I don't think it will be disaster tomorrow. I think that results will be very negative, but I think those negative results will be relatively gradual over a number of years. Number two, the Eurosceptic press, which we already talked about, will say, well, it wasn't our fault. It's the bloody Europeans. They gave us such a lousy deal. Blame it on the French, which is the English have been doing for 700 years. It was the French, it was the Belgians, it was the Europeans who did it to us. And believe me, that story will have traction. So there will be resentment and negative emotion from both sides, which is already there. Thirdly, we at the moment have our cake and eat it. We at the moment have that extraordinary special deal when we're not in the bits of the EU we don't like Schengen or the Eurozone, but we're in all the bits that we do like. None of that will be on offer again. It will be off-the-shelf standard membership, sign up for the Eurozone, Schengen and the rest. So as an offer, it will be much less attractive. Fourthly, we will have to seek some alternative business model for this country. Even if it was only in the 5 to 10 year timescale, so we would have diverged some more. Fifth, in the meantime, one of two things would have happened the other side of the channel. Either Macron would have had his way, and led by the Franco-German couple, the European Union would really have got its act together, in which case they would have gone further ahead in ways that are not particularly attractive to the British, i.e. what happened to us in the 1960s happens again while we're out, so that it becomes even more difficult to make the case. Or, and this is a really serious point, the disintegrative impact of Brexit, along with all the other crises I have talked about, and lots of other parts of Europe in a big mess. Think of Italy, for example. Think of Poland and Hungary. Without us, that actually it would be the beginning of the end of the European Union, and there wouldn't be much of a European Union to go back to. So I don't think we should have any illusion. This is it. This is make or break time. If we're out, we're out, I'm afraid, and that's why we have to stay in.
I just wanted to add, actually, something that Timothy has now brought up, is that we haven't really considered the impact on Europe. And I've been working, going backwards and forwards on the Eurostar, which has been remarkably easy till recently, to the Sorbonne. And I have to say, among many of the French that I know, they are really, really worried about Brexit and what it is going to do to Europe. And I think if we look demographically, the fact that, of course, not looking at this audience, but generally it was the older adults that tended to vote leave and the younger adults that remain, and we are dramatically shifting that demography, and we will increasingly have a younger population which is to remain, and a Europe that may be far, far more damaged than probably we realise. The outcome of Brexit in 10, 15 years' time could actually be very, very different from the one we're thinking about at the moment.
Thank you, Sarah.